the FASA Leadership Lounge, where we dive into the policies shaping the work of Florida school leaders. I'm Michelle White, Executive Director of the Florida Association of School Administrators.
And I'm Jessica Janasiewicz, lobbyist for FASA and for several school districts across the state of Florida.
And for our regular Leadership Lounge listeners, hopefully that sounds a little familiar. We're doing this live. So this is our live version of Monday's podcast. So welcome. We're excited that you're here. And we're going to share a lot of updates from the legislative session, where we are and where we're going and what's coming next, and even get some questions and input from you all. So we're going to start with the political players for this session that we just had and how the dynamics of that has shaped the 2026 legislative session.
Yeah, so in Florida, our chambers, the House and the Senate, choose leaders that are there in their position for 2 years. Leading the Senate, that title of that individual is the president of the Senate. And for the last 2 years, it has been Senator Ben Albritton, who is from Wauchula. He represents the small counties number of small counties in and around Lake Okeechobee. And he was leading a chamber that has a supermajority of Republicans. So he had 27 Republican members, 12 Democrats, and 1 NPA. And that's because last year we did have someone change from the Democratic Party to being no party affiliation. So that's that individual there. So it is important when we note that they have supermajorities, because that can have an impact depending on how things go with the governor.
That's right. And then on the House side, it was led by Speaker Danny Perez. Surprisingly, he had a supermajority too, Jessica. 85 Republicans, 34 Democrats, and 1 vacant seat.
So with this supermajority, these chambers, if they chose to do so, could override any veto that the governor may or may choose to do. So that could be a bill, or that could be even the budget. If the governor were to have certain items in the budget that he vetoes, they could override that. So we'll see in the next couple of months. There are still outstanding bills that are being sent to the governor, and they have not sent him the budget yet. So we'll have to stay tuned to see how they use their supermajorities if they choose to do so.
That's right. Now, January 2025, we did see them do that in a special session where he had line item vetoed some things in the budget for that year, and they did override that. So it's a long way to go. Of course, every year it's ongoing. Advocacy is 24/7, 365. It does not stop when sine die happens.
That's right.
So this year, there were 1,896 bills filed in the entire session. That includes general resolutions and relief measures. Out of the nearly 1,900 bills, only 237 bills passed both the House and the Senate. And of those, only 192 were general bills of policy. The rest were largely resolutions or special categories of legislation.
That's right. So that ends up being a passage rate of about 12.5% of what was filed versus what was passed. That can be a little misleading, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit, because we always end up with train bills, and those are bills where a whole lot of policy gets piled onto one bill. So that is one way that they're able to get policy in, even if one specific bill does not pass. But still a real low passage rate. The last 2 years has been a grind with the legislature, to say the very least. There has been extreme discord between the House and the Senate and the House and the governor. And as a result, we didn't get a lot accomplished. And for those of you who follow our podcast or follow along what's happening in Florida politics, you know we just had another special session where they finally completed the budget. Regular session ended in March. And that's normally when we would have our budget, but we did not this year. So that kind of shows you that passage rate and how there wasn't a whole lot of agreeing going on.
That's right. Absolutely. And of course, there's a lot of things happening behind the scenes. We love government in the sunshine, but there's a lot of things happening in the background as well. So we're going to talk about some key policy areas, what actually changed for schools, districts, and students. We're going to start with our biggest education bill first, which was House Bill 1279.
That's right. So this was one of the trains that was built on the last days of session, and it has it has a very wide variety of topics that you'll find on it. One of the provisions in the bill requires school districts to notify parents of all the different virtual learning options that are available to students. The current statute at the time was just notification about FLVS. Now the district needs to notify about all the different options.
That's right. So this bill also expands opportunities for students to earn CAPE digital tool certificates in middle school and allows districts to reserve a portion of their Title I funding for STEM initiatives.
That's right. They also did some work with curriculum. The bill requires that the Department of Education develop some Algebra 1 pathways that are aligned to career and technical education programs. The idea is, let's teach Algebra 1, but let's teach it in a way that's relevant to these pathways that these students are following. This will not replace the actual assessment requirement for Algebra 1. That still remains in place, but this will be another or more additional opportunities that students could take rather than your typical Algebra 1 course. So the department's charged with creating those over the next year, and then we'll see those roll out from there.
That's right. So parents of students with disabilities are going to see some new protections as well. Districts now must notify parents when IEP services are missed and provide a plan to make up those services. So parents must be informed about their right to access service logs and progress notes as well.
The bill also expanded access to the VPK Summer Bridge program. Current law was that students were eligible if they were in the bottom 10th percent. This expands it to the bottom 25%. So more kids will be eligible for that VPK Summer Bridge program.
Yeah. So switching bills now, we're going to talk about Senate Bill 182, which was the School Teacher Training and Mentoring Program bill.
And so that bill started out doing just what it said, and what they ended up doing was adding to it in the last days of session. But the first thing it did do was create a mentoring program that would allow experienced or even retired teachers to act as mentors for your less experienced teachers, or if you have some teachers that are struggling. It is completely voluntary. So this is not something you have to do. It's not a mandate. It's just something that if your district chooses to participate. And then it also allows for some of those funds that schools earn when your students pass the AP test, IB, et cetera, some of that money could be used to provide stipends for these mentors up to $3,000. But again, that is completely up to your district. It is not a mandate that anyone do this.
That's right. And this bill that got amended very late.
Yes.
Also had some controversial topics, and there was a lot of public input provided specifically on this next part.
Believe it or not, this bill has a requirement that every school have a portrait of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln hanging in a prominent area. The good news is for this, it is only subject to appropriations. So meaning this is not something that your schools or your school districts are going to have to pay for. This is something that the state is going to pay for. They did, in fact, include funding in the budget. So that will be rolling out. The department will be choosing these portraits and I assume sending them along to the schools.
Yes. Get ready for pictures to be mailed to your school.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about the next piece of this. Students in grades 3 through 5 will once again receive cursive writing instruction, and they have to show proficiency by grade 5, by the end of grade 5. So cursive writing.
That was one that garnered quite a bit of discussion, as you might imagine. So for those of us whose cursive might have gotten a little rusty, we can all learn with our kids, perhaps. The bill also prevents certain charter schools from dismissing students based on academic performance. Basically, it says if these schools are in some kind of academic, they're being watched for their academic performance, then they can't dismiss students on the basis of the students' academic performance.
That's right. Okay, well, let's talk about some graduation requirements, and we're going to move on to House Bill 453, which gave some flexibilities.
That's right. So you may recall if you were at conference last year, we talked about a provision in a bill that allowed students who are in the marching band to count that as their PE credit. Well, it was one of those things that when it's done at the last couple days of session, we do sometimes have things that are written, maybe not exactly the way they intended. And that was basically what happened. It wasn't clear if the students had to take 1 year of marching band and that could be their art credit and then another year to be their PE credit, or could they, knock both of those credits out with 1 year, which was not the intent of the legislature, but that is how it was written. So this bill clarifies that a student who is in the marching band can in fact use it for PE, but they have to, that would be their one shot. If they want to also have it for their art credit, they have to take a second year. So clarification there. And then they also allow now students who participate in the Special Olympics, that can also count as their PE credit.
Absolutely. Okay. Moving forward, Senate Bill 538 on extracurricular activities as well.
Yes. So this bill looks, the essence of the bill started out with looking at athletics. What we've seen over time is statute has not kept up with all the changes and these choice options that we have in this state. So what we ended up with was a hodgepodge of eligibility for student athletes. So if you were a traditional public school student, you had one set of rules. Charter had another. Home education kids had another. Now we have students on the voucher program, virtual students who are taking virtual school. And it just didn't make any sense that there was not an across the board eligibility that's the same for everybody. And that's essentially what this bill does now. So it says that if a student does not have a sport at their school, every student, regardless of how they're receiving their education, will first have to play at the school that they would have been zoned. That's the first step. If that school does not have the sport that they're interested in playing, then they can play within the district that they live. If the district does not offer the sport, then it has to be a nearby school district that is geographically close to where they live. And that will now apply to everybody. So hopefully it'll make that a little more clear when we've got students trying to play a sport that they're interested in playing, but don't have it at their school.
Absolutely. The other thing is that the legislation is going to establish some new rules regarding participation fees and requires the posting of those fees to the general public and what those are. It's going to create timelines for eligibility decisions and appeals. And it's going to limit students from participating in the same sport at multiple schools during the same year, except under very certain circumstances. So limiting some of those areas.
That's right. There would be exceptions, of course, if the student were to move mid-year, things like that are reasonable. And then this is also the bill, which is probably where you heard the most about this bill, was looking at increasing payment for coaches. The coaches had been advocating that they wanted to receive larger stipends, particularly if you're up in the Panhandle area of Florida. They are losing coaches to Georgia and Alabama, some of those counties that are close by, because they pay more. Of course, there's not a lot of money to go around right now. And so the legislature did not fund it. But what they did say in this bill is that booster clubs or associations that are affiliated with either a sport or an activity, so your marching band, drama club, what have you, the school board can decide to adopt a policy that would allow those booster clubs or associations to raise money to essentially provide like a bonus to that sponsor or that coach. But it is very important to note that that is going to be up to the school board to determine if they want to have that policy. If the board decides not to pass one, then nothing happens. So it really is at the district to make that decision.
That's right. So let's just touch on also Senate Bill 178.
Yes.
This one is going to allow coaches to use personal funds to assist student athletes with things like food and transportation and recovery services, provided that the parents are consenting and the assistance is properly reported.
That's right.
Yeah. So this bill is also going to establish a $15,000 annual cap per team, and includes safeguards to ensure that the benefits are not used for recruiting purposes.
That's right. And much like the other bill, this bill also puts the onus on the school board to determine if they want to make that something that a coach can do. So again, that will be at the board to decide what that policy looks like if your board decides that they want to do so. We did also have another bill that looked at governance, and that's House Bill 1073. And this bill creates what they're calling a district school board member Bill of Rights.
Speaking of school boards.
That's right.
That's right. So the legislation is going to guarantee that school board members timely have timely access to district records, budget information, other materials that they need to carry out their responsibilities.
That's right. And it requires that any documents, if you have a board member who requests a document, that then that document be provided to all board members once they've made that request. And then it also prohibits districts from requiring NDAs to be signed as a condition of employment.
Yeah. So the bill then also establishes specific grounds for rejecting nominated employees, including credential falsification and failure to meet minimum qualifications.
That's right. We had another bill. This is one that got quite a lot of attention. You may have read about it in the paper, heard about it on the news. That's Senate Bill 1296. It's called Public Employee Relations Committee. But what it does is it impacts public sector employee unions.
Yeah. So among the biggest changes are revised certification and recertification requirements, including new participation threshold for non-public safety union elections.
And that's one of the important keys there is they did carve out public safety unions. So police and fire are not a part of this, but our teachers unions, any other unions that you may have at your school district, of course, non-school related unions as well are impacted by this. And what it requires is the way current law has it is in order to certify or recertify, you have to have 50%, at least, 50% plus one of the vote of the people who vote to certify or recertify. So maybe your union has 1,000 people, but right now, if 50 of them vote, you only have to get a majority of that 50 that chose to vote. This is going to change that. This now says that in order to certify or recertify, first, you have to have participation of at least 50% of the people who are in the unit. So if you have 1,000 members or 1,000 rather people that would be covered by this union protection, at least 500 have to participate in the vote. And then of that 50%, they have to get at least a 50% plus one, a majority of the vote there. So if in your area you've had any unions where there hasn't been a high level of participation in the vote, this could certainly impact and see those unions be not recertified.
That's right. Okay, so we're going to talk about House Bill 145. It makes some significant changes to claims against government entities, which is, of course, very important to our school districts.
Absolutely. So this is the caps, the limits that individuals who have been harmed in some way by a government entity, how much they can sue and receive for their injury. There has been a push over the last decade to up these rates. It's been 15 years since those limits have been adjusted. And we all certainly know that $1 15 years ago had a different value than it does now, to be sure. But certainly cities, counties, and school districts were concerned in watching this because if they make them so high, there were proposals to allow it to be like $1 million and $3 million. Well, some of our small school districts don't have fund balances that big. Insurance rates would go up dramatically, as you might imagine, all sorts of other impacts. But we ended up with something a little more modest.
That's right. And so this is something ongoing that FASA has been working on for years.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to talk about one more House bill, 753, which focuses on school counselors particularly.
That's right. This now says that school counselors, as a part of their employment, do not have to take the general knowledge portion of their certification. Now, this is not something, again, there's some flexibility here for school districts. If your district still wants to make that a part of their employment, they can. This is just saying it's no longer a requirement. The idea being, obviously, if they're acting as a school counselor, their role is not an instructional role. And so the idea is let's provide some flexibility there.
Absolutely. And of course, we try to make sure that there's as much local voice and control as possible.
Yes.
And so I think we said a couple times of how the school district, the school board is going to have to implement policies. That gets to the local level, and they are making those decisions as well.
That's right. So those were all bills that were passed during the regular session. And then, of course, I mentioned we didn't have a budget. So the next thing that occurred after session was we had a number of special elections that took place just almost immediately after session ended in March. And there were some very surprising results there.
Yeah. So House District 87, where Democrat Emily Gregory pulled off an upset, notable upset. She won with 51% of the vote, flipping that seat.
And that district is, of course, where that Mar-a-Lago is located. So it had an enormous swing from just the election 2 years prior. Now, we have to say a caveat here. Special elections are not necessarily indicators of what's going to happen in a general election. The folks that come out to vote in special elections tend to be your super voters. They're the people that don't miss an election. As we know, of course, in the general election, you get a much larger swath of the population, but still it was quite interesting to see.
And we're also going to see a number, every House seat is open for election right now.
Yep.
So even though they went through that special election process, they now have to start their campaign already. Like day one, they won. Great. Now they have to start running for election to be reelected in the November election. So
that's right.
That seat, who knows what's going to happen when we get to August and November for primary and general election.
It absolutely could be the case that Representative Gregory could serve from when she won in April to until November, and then someone else could win that seat. So we'll have to see, because as you said, they've had to start raising money. Same for the next individual. We had the governor tapped a state senator to be, Jay Collins, to be the lieutenant governor. And when he did, it created an opening in that state Senate seat, which is in Hillsborough County. That was another surprising upset. Brian Nathan won in that seat. Obviously, Jay Collins, Republican, had won that seat 2 years ago by a pretty strong margin. The Democrat was able to win. He was outspent about $1 million to 1. I mean, he did not have the funds that were put behind Representative Josie Tomko, who is in the Florida House, or was in the Florida House. So that was very surprising. He ended up winning very narrowly. I mean, by just hundreds of votes. It was very, very, very close. But that was another notable one. So both of those individuals were sworn in, and they got the opportunity to participate in the multiple special elections or special sessions that we've had since that time.
That's right. And so, of course, one side or the other wasn't just staying home. They were getting out there and voting along the way. So one of the next things that we want to talk about, I'm sure, is getting closer to the budget.
That's right. As we're making our way through what happened.
That's right.
We ended up finally
one more special session, Jess.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's right. We had a special session during the legislative session. Believe it or not. So we had a special session on congressional redistricting. This is just the map for our congressional seats in the state of Florida. The legislature did pass it. The governor signed it. It is making its way through the court system now. More than likely, it will be upheld. But you're right. That was our first special session.
That's right. Okay, now we can talk about the budget.
Yes.
Now we went into special session again. It stalled, of course. Again, we talked about how the House, the Senate, the governor, they weren't all getting along at the very beginning. People weren't even shaking hands on the first day of session, and that's the happiest day of session is the first day.
It is.
They're all still friends usually. So anyway, here's where we came out during the budget discussions.
One of the things we knew for sure, just like many of you probably experienced at the school district level, the state benefited from federal dollars during COVID, and we were able to spend those over a period of time. Well, that time is up. And what we saw last year and this year was our revenue estimates, which we have economists who are able to try as best they can, read the tea leaves, look at the economic factors, look at the numbers of people who are moving to Florida, look at the birth rate, all of these factors to try to get an idea of what the economic forecast is going to look like years down the road. And what they told us a couple of years ago is we are going to be running at a deficit if we continue spending the way we are in this state. So, excuse me. So last year, the legislature actually had a smaller budget than we had the year prior. And then that's where we ended up this year as well. They made further cuts from what they had done last year to where our actual budget is smaller than it was in previous years.
That's right. So this year, the FEFP total funds per student is an increase of $150.31. The increase in the BSA this year will be $85. And so, however, the statewide growth in scholarship students is combined with mandated expenses and other things that really change the picture of what this means. So, increasing in district total funding after scholarships are deducted, we're looking at $141,913,106 to be exact.
To be exact.
To the dollar.
But then when you then take out the further mandated expenses, these are things like school safety. These are the things like that the state says you will spend this money this way. The teacher salary allocation is the same way. That money is part of a big pot, but districts don't have that to just spend however they want. They're told how to spend that. So when you deduct that from the increase, we're actually at a negative of almost $60 million. We did have a little bit of good news.
Yep.
FRS rates were lower. The costs were lower this year. So that's going to be a savings to school districts. And the legislature did decide to provide what they're calling a declining enrollment fund. So across the board, we saw some dramatic differences at the beginning of the year from the number that the state expected to be in our classrooms versus the numbers that actually showed up. They think in part this may be due to some of the federal efforts when it comes to immigration. No one really knows. All we know is it was way more than what we usually see. Of course, there's fluctuations, obviously, from time to time of who shows up versus what they think, but it was a dramatic decrease. In a few areas of the state, it was so dramatic that we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. Obviously, districts have already started the school year. They have hired the people they're going to hire. They have put kids in the classrooms. There's only so much adjusting we can do once you're off to the school year starting. So what the legislature did was they provided money in this budget that will actually backfill for those losses during this school year. So that is another bright spot in the budget this year.
Yeah, we're trying to find all the silver linings.
Yes.
So the budget has not been sent to the governor officially. Of course, everything is about timing.
Yes.
When we are talking about the legislature and the governor, everything is about timing. They will find the right time that works for them so that he can then go through it. And he will have opportunities to do specific line item vetoes throughout the entire budget, not just education, and then move forward from there. The final special session concluded last week. We had one more special session.
Special session F.
That's right.
We were on.
And it was focused on property taxes. So once again, the legislature, they were largely considering a proposal that was put forth by the governor rather than advancing their own plan. We had seen during session that the House passed one plan. The Senate didn't have one to bring forward, and the governor kept really pushing for his. So under the governor's original proposal, the school taxes would have also been exempted, and which would have been a move if school taxes were included. It would have been substantial financial impact on Florida's public school district.
Huge. Absolutely. What's interesting about this is, of course, this will go on the ballot. So it is a resolution by the legislature. What that means is the governor does not sign it. It requires 2/3 of the vote in both the House and the Senate in order to pass, but then it goes on the ballot. The governor does not get any say. So what the legislature did was they looked at his proposal and they stripped out the school tax piece. So all school-related taxes that are collected in your property taxes will remain. So that's wonderful news for us, for school districts, to be sure. Of course, as you might imagine, there are still concerns from cities and counties, police and fire, all those folks who are funded by those local communities through their property taxes. So this is what the proposal will do. It will exempt the first $150,000 of your property assessment in the first year. And in the second year, it will move to $250,000. And then it says that the legislature can kind of decide from there if they want to make a scale where they could continue to increase that exemption so that over time, there wouldn't be property taxes anymore. But the only actual numbers that are in there are the 150 the first year and the 250 the second year. So it gave the legislature, I think they proposed it that way because it would give them some latitude if this ends up being, detrimental to cities and counties.
That's right. And for new Florida residents who were not permanent residents by December 31 of 2026, so this year, if they are not residents by then, it only exempts their first $25,000 for school taxes and exempts the first $50,000 for non-school taxes. It will grant full resident homestead exemption after 5 years. So then those people will be considered true Florida residents and they'll get the full benefits. It does require the legislature to create a uniform process for certain local governments to increase property tax exemptions along the way. And it's going to lower the annual cap on assessment increases for non-homestead property from 10% to 5%. It's going to further restrict how counties and municipalities can use their ad valorem or property tax revenue as well. So, if approved by voters, those amendments will take effect January 1. This is, like Jessica said, a resolution. It's going on the November ballot. So, voters will have to approve this at 60% in order for this to move forward. And we'll go from there.
That's right. And we'll have to wait and see. Certainly, 2 years ago, we had marijuana on the ballot. That failed. That there was a lot of money spent there. I know we all saw the commercials on both sides for that. Certainly, we'll see I'm sure, a PR effort on both sides with this as well. So we'll have to see what happens in November.
Yeah. So we want to get a little bit of your thoughts and feedback. So one question I'm going to ask now, and we're going to put a QR code up on the screen. What's keeping you up at night? Be honest. If you can tell us in maybe a word or two, short. You can enter it multiple times if there's more than one. But here's how this process works for FASA. Okay. One, every fall we ask you for issues and input on where FASA can be stronger in our platform and what we're taking to the legislature. We want to hear from you about what those topics are. You are helping to build the 26-27 legislative platform from FASA. Okay. And then we want to know, are there any questions that we can take right now about anything we've talked about, or maybe it's a bill we didn't cover, and hopefully Jessica and I can pull those details.
Absolutely. I see funding is obviously a major issue. We know that as we've made these cuts the last 2 years, the legislature we have seen that become more and more of an issue.
Yeah. Funding, teachers. Okay.
Cuts. Enrollment, that is certainly something. There was an effort the last 2 years on the Senate side to essentially kind of try to fix some of these issues that we've had with the scholarship program, namely ensuring that the money is in fact following the student to whatever their choice option is. I know I think in one of the districts I work with, it's I think 300 students that were sitting in their schools this year that they didn't receive funding for because somehow their parent had applied for a scholarship. They decided not to utilize it, but the money was not following where that student was going. That is a huge budgetary issue that needs to get resolved. And the legislature, took a pass on that the last 2 years, but I think we'll see renewed efforts for that this
That's
year.
right. Okay, I didn't see anybody jump with questions. All right, keep going. If there's more words that you want to give us more words. But let me tell you what goes next, okay? So between now and the election, there are more potential special sessions that can happen,
Absolutely.
okay? If the governor just doesn't like something and he vetoes, again, like Jessica said, there's super majorities. The House and the Senate can come back and they can override any veto he may put into the budget.
That's right.
So maybe there's some more special sessions. We don't know yet. August 18th is the primary. So this is where we're going to go through that season. Please get out and vote. I know you all probably, as school districts, have some referenda on the ballot in November. Get out the vote, get people out there. November 3rd is that general election. November 17th, so right after that, they're all coming to Tallahassee for organizational session and be sworn in and learn how to get from the plaza level, the please leave level at the Capitol. That's what I like to call it. It says PL on the elevator, the please leave level. They'll figure out how to use the elevators with no buttons and where the bathrooms are. And that's what organizational session is kind of like. It's a couple of days. They get to know each other and figure out how to get around the Capitol. And then in November to December, we have those interim committee meetings where they're going to come and they're going to start talking about policy. They'll have maybe some panel discussions of what's going on.
That's right. And they'll continue through January and February. So we have Advocate that takes place usually in January. That means if you come this year, you'll be a part of the interim committee period. Session will begin in March and it will run from March to May. So this is a late session. Odd years are late. Even years are early. That's because even years are election years and they want to get back home.
That's right. Okay. So first and foremost, thank you for being here. We are excited to share updates with you. We are your resource. FASA is here to support you in this work. We want to make sure that you're staying updated on the podcast. Can I get a raise of hands of who's already subscribed and listens to the podcast on the regular? Love it. It is ongoing. Every Monday, new episode is launched. A special thank you to our producer, Jeff Willoughby, who's sitting in the back and is probably pulling his hair out because we went off script just like we do in real time. It's just all the time we just go off script and he's like, I don't know what to do about it. But we want to be partners with you. We want to navigate these issues. So please make sure you're providing us some feedback. Remember that every episode of the Leadership Lounge has resources. So when we talk about bills, there's links to all of those documents. You do have to be a full service member of FASA to access those. So if you have a blue lanyard, you have access to all of those resources, including the ones from today. But we'll make sure you have updates through our newsletters. But again, there is more to come. And I know we've got some other things coming up next in our show here at Discover 26. Welcome and thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lounge podcast presented by the Florida Association of School Administrators. Today's podcast was hosted by Michelle White and Jessica Janasiewicz. The podcast was produced by Jeff Willoughby. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. New episodes are released each Monday. For show topics, suggestions, questions, or comments, please email communications@fasa.net. We hope you enjoyed the show.